and welcome to the debut episode of The Year Was. My name is Aaron Thomas. I am in the basement of Jeff Hans. That's how you say your last name, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. That would have been a bad way to start. The Year Was is a brand new podcast brought to you by CoLab Digital. And here on this podcast, Jeff and I are going to sit down once a week and we're going to pick a year in movies and we're going to discuss that year in length and probably to nausea. We're going to have lots of different categories and things to talk about in this year, so we're going to get right into it. Welcome to the debut episode of The Year Was 2008.
What a great year. You know, you mentioned 2008 as being a great year for movies, and I didn't realize how great it actually was. So in researching the movies that came out this year, I was pleasantly surprised. And what's funny is I was talking to my wife about this, that a lot of these movies seem like they're a lot younger than 2008. And I think it's because some of these movies I didn't see until they were on like streaming services many years later. I didn't see a lot of them in theaters. I mean, I saw a lot of movies that year in theaters, but a lot of them I just didn't see.
I think I had the same thought, but it was kind of a reverse in terms of like I saw it in the theater. Because I think, full disclosure, before we go any further, I was in 7th grade. I started 2008 in 7th grade, and when 2008 ended, I was in 8th grade. So I was young. So I saw a lot of these movies in the theater, but obviously at that young of an age, it's going to have a different impact on you than it does now. So, you know, when I was doing the research and looking back on these movies, it's like, man, this is a really great year, and you don't realize it until you look back on it and just
I
it
graduated
was a lot of fun.
in 2006, so that was 2 years removed from high school. And what's funny about that is, at that time I was living with my grandmother, so any like expendable income kind of went towards just going out to the movies. Mm-hmm. So just by the sheer amount of movies that I saw in theaters this year tells you how much expendable income I actually had.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because I know that you and I had talked about before that your wife, like early on in your dating, you know, when you guys were dating, that you went to the movies a lot.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I was imagining, you know, doing the time math in my head, like this was probably a time where you guys were going to the movies a lot. So that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you at one point was, you know, how many of these movies did you watch with her?
Good Lord. It was a lot. Yeah. I mean, I could probably run down this list and name at least, I don't know, 10, 15 movies that we saw in theaters.
Well, we'll name them as we go along, and I think we'll probably name a few of them here in this first category. This first category is going to be called The Rundown. The Rundown is IMDb's 20 biggest movies at the box office in 2008. Before we go, just a guess. Obviously, I already have the answer, so I don't have a guess. What is your guess for number one?
I would say Dark Knight had to be. And that's just all the hype that came behind Heath Ledger's death. And people were hyped up about Heath Ledger even being able to play the Joker character.
Not only you're right, and I think it's a pretty obvious choice if you just Google search movies that came out in 2008, two of the big ones that come up that you're first going to see are Dark Knight and Iron Man. So they're going to be the first two that pop out to you. Like, yeah, those probably make a lot of money. So
Bond does traditionally well, so probably Quantum of Solace did well.
It is in the top 10. So let's So we already know what number one is. Dark Knight was number one, $534 million at the box office. And you said it right there. The opposite of what happened to The Last Jedi. This movie was blessed by the death of Heath Ledger, as horrible as that is to say.
Right.
A big part of why that movie was so successful was the hype around him playing that character and then his death. And it's like, wow, guys, he's incredible in this.
Right.
And everyone saw that based on that. And it was true.
And then him being nominated for awards, posthumously, it was like every star that could possibly align for that movie to be successful. I mean, not only being a Nolan film, like it's just everything came together for that movie to be popular in the theater.
Yeah, it was just it was a crescendo of, I don't know, of all the nice things that happened. And it really kind of was a theme of that year too, because, and we'll get on to this later on, Number 2 is Iron Man, and that made $318 million at the box office.
So that surprises me because that kind of kicked off the Marvel Universe.
It did. It was the very first Marvel Universe movie.
Well, I mean, technically the Hulk movies kind of were kicking that off. It was like dipping their toe in the sand and trying to like figure out the whole universe. And it just kind of surprised me that Iron Man did as well as it did, being kind of like starting off the MCU.
It was. I was surprised to see it at number 2. I thought it would crack the top 10, definitely the top 20. I was surprised to see it at number 2. I do remember seeing that movie in the theaters. I'm sure you saw that one in the theaters too. I remember seeing that in the theaters. It was awesome, super cool. Jon Favreau, I'll say this till the end, will never get enough credit for what he did building that movie, building the MCU as a whole. I mean,
he's influencing the Star Wars universe now. The man just has no limits.
Exactly. And he did Elf. This guy cannot do wrong. Number 3, I have this one simply written down as the Shia LaBeouf Indiana Jones movie. It made $317 million at the box office, and all of those people wish they could get their money back.
So that's one that I specifically avoided seeing, and I still have to this day not seen it.
Oh, I've seen it once, and it's...
But what's funny is my wife has seen parts of the original trilogy, but she hasn't seen them all the way through. But she loves Short Round.
That's funny. That's funny. All the way around there. Number 4 at the box office was Hancock, a really weird movie that I remember really liking at the time. I don't think lives on well. Like, I don't think it holds up well.
So we usually go to sleep watching movies. Like, instead of turning on, like, the news to go to sleep to or something like that, we'll turn on a movie and just leave it until the TV goes off. And that's still one of those ones that I come back to every once in a while to watch.
Really?
So it does. I think it has rewatch value.
Really? Maybe it's just been a while since I've seen it. $227 million at the box office for Hancock.
It surprises me that it was that high, though. I don't think that it was that quality of a movie to crack that high into the list.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that where Will Smith was at his career.
Will Smith being Will Smith.
Yeah, and this is probably maybe a year to 2 years after Pursuit of Happiness, which is probably his biggest film.
Yeah.
Number 5, WALL-E, $223 million at the box office.
I absolutely believe that.
Oh, and it still holds up to this day. One of the best movies. It's awesome. Super fun. Doesn't make you feel good at certain parts, but
it's one of my favorite Pixar films, and there's not even a word spoken until like 35 minutes into the film, which tells you how much you can do with just visuals and a little robot that cleans up trash.
And particularly when something's aimed towards kids, because if that was aimed towards adults, a lot of us would be like, what the hell's going on?
This is stupid. Yeah. But if kids can sit there and watch a robot roll around in dirt for a couple of hours, I think an adult can.
Exactly, or at least you should try. Number 6, another animated film, Kung Fu Panda, $215 at the box office.
So you probably aren't going to believe this, but I've never seen any of the Kung Fu Pandas.
I have seen like maybe 10 minutes of the original movie, but I played the video game through, so I know what happened in the movie.
But I love Jack Black. Like,
love him.
I mean, come on.
Number 7, a film that I think is safe to say that neither of us have seen, Twilight, $191 at the box office.
I saw Twilight not in theaters, but over a friend's house. I was hungover, and I remember watching it to the point that Robert Pattinson, that's his name, right?
Yep.
Okay, Robert Pattinson is like, I want to show you what I really am.
Oh, no.
And then he starts sparkling in the sunshine, like glistening, and he's all diamond plated or whatever the hell. And I just remember at that point having such a bad hangover, turning over, and I'm like, fuck this. Just turning
Is that
over.
a thing? Vampires, they glisten in the sun?
It's not a thing, but it's a thing in the Twilight universe.
Number 8 is another animated movie, and I think I think this is going to be a trend we see a lot in this category moving forward. I think you're going to see a lot of animated movies in the top 20, particularly in the top 10, because parents love taking their kids to the movies, and they love to have an excuse for them to sit there and be quiet. Madagascar 2, Escape to Africa, $180 million at the box office. I've never seen any of the Madagascar movies.
If I remember correctly, the first one was extremely successful. And in part due to the cast, because it's it's Chris Rock.
Chris
and,
Rock, Schwimmer from
Yeah.
Friends, and
And I think that
some
draw
other
kind of
people.
came from all over because of the cast being so diverse that a lot of parents were like, "Oh, I'm going to go see it for this particular actor, and I'm going to take my kids because it's a kids movie."
yeah.
So it kind of it hit all the right boxes.
I will say this till the end. If you can make a halfway decent kids movie that has 2-3 scenes in it that adults will like, it's a license to print money.
Yes.
Because you're going to want to take your kids to the movie, and when it comes out on DVD, you're going to buy it.
And as long as you've got some name to draw people in,
Exactly.
it doesn't matter.
The Missing Link with Hugh Jackman that came out this past year. No one saw it. It was awesome. Everyone's going to love that movie in 10 years. I'm calling it now. Number 9, here's you, James Bond, Quantum Solace. Is that how you say it?
Yeah. Quantum of Solace. Yeah.
168 million. I believe, you could stop me if I'm wrong here, this is the second Daniel Craig James Bond movie, right?
I can't remember if it's the second or the third, but I recently rewatched this. Not that great upon
Really?
rewatch. I've rewatched it a couple times, but I don't know. It just kind of falls a little bit flat compared to especially the other films in this series. But I don't know. I loved it in theaters. I thought it was great because it's a Bond film.
Yeah. I've seen some Bond movies, but I know that you and Rob are much more Bond guys than I am,
Yeah.
so I was going to leave that one to you guys. Here's the rounding out the top 10 in the rundown, our last animated film in the top 10. Horton Hears a Who, 154 million at the box office. Never saw that.
I haven't watched too many of the Dr. Seuss adaptation movies. So
One thing I didn't know, and I just saw this on a Watch Mojo video. Shout out to Watch Mojo. I love their stuff. The reason all of the Dr. Seuss stuff now is animated is because the widow of Dr. Seuss hated the Cat in the Hat movie so much
Yeah.
that she refuses to
Yeah,
allow
they won't-
anything live adaptation.
they won't license anybody to do anything with it because they feel that he ruined that.
I only feel this way because of the time I saw it, because I think that movie came out when I was like 13 and I was just obsessed with Mike Myers. I think that movie's hilarious.
Yeah.
Number 11, Sex and the City, 152 million. I think we can just move on.
I haven't seen it, but I think that primarily was successful because of the timing was correct because the TV show was it was 2 years removed or something like that.
At least.
And then it just kind of was one of those things where they're like, hey, nostalgia, we can go see our favorite characters. I'm Samantha.
Here's where I think was get really interesting, because here's where we start to see our first original film. Everything else here leading up to this is either a comic book, it's an animated film that's Disney. It's like it's got some kind of built-in niche to it. Gran Torino, number 12, 148 million. Now, I guess you could say Clint Eastwood is his own institution,
Yeah.
and people see that because it's Clint Eastwood, but that is an original film, and I think this is kind of the movie that put Clint Eastwood back on the map. He had a little bit of a hiatus, made a couple bad films leading up to that, or a couple questionable films leading up to that, and then he's director and star in this one, and he just kills it.
See, I haven't seen it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome
Believe it
movie.
or not, I haven't seen it. No, it's on my list. It's definitely on the list of things to see, but I just never got around to seeing it. And if I remember correctly, the marketing for that around that time, it just wasn't there. There wasn't a whole lot of marketing for it. But then when the award season came around, it was won a bunch of awards and
Yeah,
stuff.
they
and I'm
pumped
like,
it up.
Oh, okay.
I think that goes in with what I was saying before. I mean, Clint Eastwood, it's just weird to think now he just wasn't on a hot streak running into that movie. I
Right.
think that had a lot to do with it. Another one, it's become its own institution, its own franchise, and relaunched someone as well in Taken. Number 13, 145 million at the box office.
Now that was one that had an excellent marketing campaign.
Oh, yeah.
and was just one of those turn your brain
Still
off
remember that
action
commercial.
movies. Yeah, it was intense. And then afterwards, everybody making all the memes about the hit the phone call,
Yeah.
and all that. That just became a huge phenomenon.
And it's funny. I mean, this, like I said, I was young when this came out, so Liam Neeson to me was Qui-Gon Jinn when I saw this.
Right.
And then now, I know that's Oscar Schindler. So it's it's so weird to think that, this kind of relaunched Liam Neeson. He had a great resurgence after that, but he had a tremendous career leading up to this
Right.
too. Old Man Who Kicks Ass. Who would have known? Number 14, Mamma Mia, 144 million. I think we could just move on with this one too. Number 15.
I like ABBA music.
That's all I know. Meryl Streep's in it. That's all I know. Number 15, Marley and Me. Damn this movie. 143
I
million
don't
at
see
the box
dog
office.
movies anymore. I don't watch movies with a dog in it.
No.
You know, there's okay for those of you who do love pets and love dogs. There is a website you can go to anytime you go to see a movie and you have a feeling that they might kill the dog. DoesTheDogDie.com.
Oh my
It will
God.
tell you if the dog dies in the movie before you see it. So if you want to boycott the movie, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I there's a running joke in my house that anytime there's a dog in it, I will not see it because you usually know that the dog's gonna die. Number 16, Narnia, Prince of Caspia, 141 million at the box office. This is the second Narnia movie. I never saw it, but the book was awesome.
I saw the first one, and it was intriguing and a beautifully orchestrated movie, and it was interesting. I had never read the books, didn't really know anything about them going into it, but the first one was great, but I didn't have enough interest in seeing the rest of it.
Yeah, I remember seeing the first one in the theater. I never saw the second one, but the book was awesome. Like I said, I will take it to my grave that the Mr. Tumnus guy in the first one, the half goat, I think that's James McAvoy is the guy who plays that character.
Yeah.
In that movie, he looks like Johnny Manziel. You'll never be able to convince me
Mr.
otherwise. Number 17, Slumdog Millionaire, 141 at the box office. I never saw this. Everyone loves it.
I think that
it
was
swept the awards that year.
Yeah, that was an award darling. And I think it was just I'm not sure. I liked it. I did see it, and I liked it, but I think it was one of those movies that was a big character driven, character building, because it was essentially he's on this game show and they give you the whole backstory of how he got to that point in his life, and he's answering the $1 million questions and stuff, and
he's doing it for a girl, right? I
don't really remember.
I think he's trying to get her attention or something.
Yeah, I can't remember the full premise, but they give you the backstory of how he knows the answer to this question. So it would be here's the question, and then he answers it, and then goes back to here's his part of his life, why he would know that, why anyone would know that.
That's smart.
So it was really great. It was really well put together. But
sounds like one of those cute movies you watch once. It's it's a one and done. You know.
That's kind of how it was for me. I was I don't really want to rewatch it, but.
Here's one that I definitely don't want to rewatch. Number 18, The Incredible Hulk, 134 million at the box office. For those who don't remember, this was the Edward Norton Hulk movie.
No interest in seeing it. Have never seen it. Do not care.
Oh, it's terrible. It's so bad. And I feel terrible saying that because Edward Norton, Columbia, Maryland's finest, one of my favorite actors. And
I love Ed Norton.
So glad
I'm
that
not watching that hot garbage.
Yeah, I'm so glad he forced his way out of that Marvel contract because no more Ed Norton. We got Mark Ruffalo, and Edward Norton's done great things since then. 19, Wanted, 134 million at the box office. I love this movie.
That was an extremely fun summer movie. It was great.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. It's one of those ones, if you see it.
I believe that's based off of a book, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is. Most good things are. Number 20, and rounding out our list at 130 million, is the Get Smart remake with Steve Carell and The Rock.
Which I've heard is actually really good.
Yeah, everyone that I've ever heard talk about this movie says it's hey, you got to watch it. I know no one likes it, but it's actually kind of funny. I've
heard good things. I haven't. It's not one that drew my attention.
It's The Rock, I don't know what the year was in his career, but there was a year, there's a point in The Rock's career where it's everything up to that year you just don't want to watch. I don't know if he got a good agent or if he just started picking better movies, but it was at some point The Rock was you know what, I'm actually going to stop making absolute garbage.
But as cheesy as they were, I liked Walking Tall, but that was a remake from a movie in the 70s. I think this one was about the drug dealers selling cocaine or something like that, and I think in the 70s it was the town was someone in the town was selling weed or something. It was something innocuous.
Something white people don't go to jail for now.
Something that's probably legal now. And what was the Scorpion King?
Yeah,
was cheesy but still entertaining.
Yeah, he kicks a lot of butt in that movie.
Yeah.
All right, well that's that's our top 20 list of movies at the box office. You had number 1, Dark Knight, 534 million, and number 20, Get Smart at 130. So it's crazy to see, it's a big difference in money there, 130 million to 534 million.
I'd be interested to know what the worst grossing.
I bet you can find that. That could be a lookup on IMDb at some point.
All right, where do we go from here?
Yeah, as Jeff looks that up, we're gonna get into our kind of sports categories here for this. We got MVP, Rookie of the Year, Director, and we're gonna start with MVP. And
now, what did you mean by MVP? Are you talking about director, actor, anybody?
Yeah, it
that
could
was
be
just
anybody.
The most influential person that year?
Yeah, or just who, I kind of tried to look at it, so how I judged the MVP is at first I went to the Oscars page and I went to see who was nominated for Oscars, and then I went to their filmography page and saw what other movies they had coming out that year, what other movies or films they may have been in that year or done that year. And but I think MVP can be anybody. Could be a director, could be a writer, could be an actor. Here in this episode, I have it as an actor, but here in another episode that we're going to record later on today, I have it as a director. So, I think whoever had the biggest year, when you look at the whole year in movies, what person stands out to you the most? And I think once I say this name, it'll be pretty obvious to you. MVP, I had it between two people, and that's Heath Ledger and Robert Downey Jr. Heath Ledger for The Joker, Dark Knight, obviously, and Robert Downey Jr. had Iron Man and Tropic Thunder that year.
That's true. That's tough. I would go as far to say Nolan, just because he was on a hot streak. He was putting together, orchestrating some pretty large talents in Dark Knight.
To put some large set pieces as well.
Large set pieces, a lot of action, the dude just has vision for that kind of stuff.
A lot of innovative stuff, too. Like, everyone's kind of seen, who are huge movie buffs like us, who have seen how he did the flip on the 18-wheeler. Like, that's all practical effects. Like, that was kind of stuff that was not really happening at that time.
Hey, are we going to do this CGI? And he's just like, nah, we're going to flip a truck.
Yeah.
And, for somebody to come out and say that, especially in the advent of a time where, we were talking about the Mr. Tumnus, those movies.
Oh, Narnia.
The Narnia movies.
Yeah.
Huge CGI everything.
And
green screen the whole thing.
And a guy who's not Steven Spielberg. Nolan, we're talking about this in 2019. This is 2008. Nolan is still building this world. He's coming off Prestige and Batman Begins, so he's got some pull. But he's not Steven Spielberg at this time. And now Nolan walks in, he's like, we're fucking doing this. And everyone's like, cool, sweet. I'm glad to be on your team.
I've just loved everything that he's done up to this point. So it's just
that's a great little throw in. I thought about him putting in there, and the only reason I didn't put him in there is because it's the only thing he did. And I just thought, with Heath Ledger, this being such a huge moment, and not just for him, but such a huge moment for everyone. Everyone who loved that movie, you just hold on to that performance.
Cinema in general, because up to that point, I think everyone kind of knew him. What was it? The Last Night, or what was that?
He did The Patriot, 10 Things I Hate About You, and he was also coming off of Brokeback Mountain at this point as well.
Okay, yeah. So Brokeback Mountain kind of set the tone for what he was capable of.
Yeah.
And then leading off of that, going into a superhero movie and just knocking it out of the park,
playing the Joker too. People, it's really difficult to think about this now, because once again, we're looking at this in 2019. Everyone was like, dude, Jack Nicholson killed that. How are you going to do that? You know? And
even Nicholson was like, watch yourself, kid.
Yeah. But we're talking about Heath Ledger. I think we do want to bring up Robert Downey Jr. This is another one. We're looking at it in 2019. It's really hard to look at it from those eyes back then.
Robert Downey Jr. in blackface. What can I say?
Yeah, exactly. And Iron Man, Favreau had to go to bat for him to be Iron Man. Yeah. Disney, Robert Downey Jr. is coming off multiple drug charges.
Not a Disney image. It definitely was not.
Far from being Dr. Dolittle. Honorable mentions here for MVP. A solid year for Brad Pitt, who had Benjamin Button and Burn After Reading this year.
Yeah.
he was nominated for Benjamin Button, and he totally stole the show in Burn After Reading. This is the first and certainly not last appearance by Meryl Streep, who is in the honorable mentions as well for Mamma Mia and Doubt, which is one of my favorite movies from this year. Rookie of the Year. This is, I think, going to be a tough category moving forward because it's kind of hard to figure out, what actors are really rookies, But I went with a little bit of a curveball here on Rookie of the Year, and I just went for the Marvel Universe / superhero genre in general, because I kind of think this was the bomb that exploded that.
It kicked off and showed that you can adapt something that wasn't exactly the biggest draw as far as a comic book, because Iron Man honestly wasn't a huge seller.
I had one cousin who liked Iron Man, and I thought he was a nerd.
And they had the cartoon show, but that also wasn't like a huge draw. And so you're taking, look what they've done with Guardians of the Galaxy. That was a flop. That was a commercial failure for Marvel. But they brought out these characters.
Now it's my grandmother's favorite superhero movie.
They bring out these characters, and they do it in a way that you've got, big names playing these characters, and you give them personality, and you put them on the big screen, and all of a sudden, everyone's buying a Rocket Raccoon toy.
It's like Neil Peart said in Limelight from the Rush song. The real relation is the underlying theme, and it's the relation to these characters and finding a way to relate to people in tights who are saving the world. Sounds kind of crazy, but Disney, Marvel, Christopher Nolan, these super geniuses have found a way to do it.
And what's funny is that I think that Favreau has a way of tailoring his movies towards the careers of the people that are in them, because Iron Man in a lot of ways does mimic the life of Robert Downey Jr. doing these big grandiose things in a way that he realizes is not probably the best way to do it, and then having a life-changing moment where he goes to jail, he goes in the cave, and then emerges out of this in a blaze of glory, Rise of the Phoenix type situation.
Absolutely.
So it's crazy how all of that gets catered kind of towards the careers of these people he's working with.
I think that's one of the reasons Favreau pushed so hard for him, because he knew that he was going to understand that arc probably better than anyone. It's like, I want an American cheeseburger. Everyone knows that story.
Can we give another MVP award to Robert Pattinson from Twilight? And the reason that I'm giving it to him is because he took a chance on doing this movie, and it ended up being a super popular series. And then,
a lot of cash in his pocket.
And then from that has risen to, in recent years, some of the greatest acting that I've ever seen.
Yeah, and now he's Batman. I was about to get to the honorable mentions, and he was the first one I had here for Rookie of the Year, because I think Twilight was his first big break. Say what you will about those movies, but you cannot dispute what he's done since then. He is a tremendous actor. I think he's one of the best actors working right now, and he will be nominated for an Academy Award within the next 5 years.
Even if you want to crap talk those movies, regardless of whether or not people like them in the general public, they were extremely successful, and people went out in droves to see them.
A lot of cash in the pocket.
It's just like the 50 Shades movies.
Yeah.
Horrible movies. Absolutely terrible. But people went out in droves to go see them.
A lot of cash in the pockets. People forget sometimes. I think people forget sometimes. This is a business, and at the end of the day, the money is what matters most in the business. Dev Patel, who is the main actor in Slumdog Millionaire, he's another guy I have here as honorable mention for Rookie of the Year. Slumdog Millionaire really is first big film. He's had a couple really good performances since then. He was in a movie called The Lion, The Man Who Knew Infinity, which is another one, and he's playing David Copperfield in a movie coming out soon.
He's going to be David Copperfield in the movie?
Yeah.
That's crazy. I like that, though.
I know. Isn't it interesting when I saw that? And my last honorable mention for Rookie of the Year, Hurt Locker wasn't his first movie, but I think it was the movie that put him on the map, and that's Jeremy Renner.
And Hurt Locker, if I remember correctly, won Movie of the Year at the Oscars.
I'm fairly certain it did.
And that movie really was a fantastic, intense
Awesome.
movie. But what the point of contention, and this happens a lot with those types of movies, is that it was like a slow burn, and people were like, there's a lot of air in that, and I didn't really like that. But it was a lot of tension building, and you're defusing bombs in the Middle East. So
Look, I think people who nitpick on that movie are probably just repeating things that somebody else has said to them, because if you watch that movie, that's not the stuff that sticks out to you. It's the intense moments that stick out to you, like when he's defusing the bomb, as you said. Like that stuff's intense. So here's a category that I know you're going to be interested in. Director of the year, I have that as coach of the year. And I have for director your man, Christopher Nolan, Dark Knight. Can't really argue with that, I'm sure. I'm sure you don't want to.
I had Darren Aronofsky.
I have him in the honorable mentions. He's the wrestler that year.
The Wrestler. I thought, honestly, the Wrestler was such an accurate portrayal, and this is what I've heard from other wrestlers that have retired and talked about the movie.
Oh, and I've been to wrestling shows like that.
It's such
very
an accurate portrayal of what it's like to be a former wrestler trying to continue on with that fame, and the only skills you have are wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So you're blowing out knees and you're breaking limbs, and you know, you've got terrible joints, but this is all you can do because that's all you have. So
I had a buddy who wanted to be a wrestler, and he told me he watched The Wrestler 20 times in a row just to make sure that that's what he really wanted to do.
And Mickey Rourke, I'm
incredible.
not a huge fan of him, but that movie really made me a fan of him.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't a draw for me to go see that, but that was one of those movies that I'm like, I'm really glad I saw this.
Plus, Marissa Tomei, total babe in that movie.
A lot of people like Marissa Tomei, and I think she shows herself in a couple of movies. I've never been a huge fan.
Okay, so yeah, that's a hot take and a half. So we have director of the year. You have Darren Aronofsky. I have no way I said that. Aronofsky. There we go.
Aronofsky.
And I have Christopher Nolan. Some of my honorable mentions, I already said I had Darren there. I also have Catherine Bigelow for Hurt Locker. David Fincher, who had Benjamin Button that year. Gus Van.
I forgot that Fincher did Benjamin Button.
Yeah.
And I forget that because it is his style, but I think the content doesn't feel like it would be his content.
Super weird.
Yeah.
You know, actually, it's funny that you
It's
say
like
that
him-
because when I looked at his filmography, it's like boom, 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 boom. Oh, that stands out. Like
It's like him doing The Social Network. How that marriage came to be, I have no idea. Like,
I bet that was just something he was interested
it
in.
was just so strange. But I love his nihilistic look at things, and I think that Benjamin Button felt pseudo nihilistic, but ultimately kind of like a happier tone. It was strange. It was strange.
Yeah, it is. I like that movie. It is a weird movie. I remember having to rewatch it to really enjoy it, though, and to really get it. I mean, so yeah, Gus Van Sant had Milk that year, and Jon Favreau, Iron Man. So that's my honorable mentions for director. And now we're here kind of more into the personal stuff. I got your personal favorite movie of the year. I have Dark Knight for mine.
I had Dark Knight. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to, right?
Yeah, I think if you're a superhero fan and if you really like movies, you kind of have to pick The Dark Knight.
That's one that I originally, this is going to sound weird, but I originally bought a Blu-ray player because I saw Avatar in theaters, and the 3D and just how crisp and clean everything looked. Forget like the storyline and all that, just the way that it looked. I wanted to be able to mimic that at home, so I bought a Blu-ray player specifically for that.
That's cool.
And then Dark Knight being one of those films that I'm just like, the sound of it was just so over the top, overwhelming, and just like hits every sense, even if it's just a sound, it gives you chills. And I bought that on Blu-ray because I was like, this is one of those movies I have to have on Blu-ray.
It looks better.
Yeah.
It looks better. Makes a difference. For those of you at home who don't think, watching a movie at like the top, its best quality ever, like it just makes so much of a difference.
Yeah, even just streaming something versus like popping in an actual Blu-ray. You don't really realize the difference until you do it.
Yeah, no, it really does make a huge difference. The Dark Knight, the first time I saw it, was on a date with a girl, and I did not really get it that much. I mean, it was like entertaining, but I was like, what's the hype? And then it wasn't until I saw it later on DVD with some friends where it's like, man, this is different. This guy's intense. So
The scene where they're testing, it's totally unrealistic. It would never actually work, but they're testing the bullets, like he's shooting in the giant gun into the concrete. None of that works. But anyway,
who cares? It's cool as shit.
The sound of that was like so deafening in the theater, and then every time that we like play it at home, I turn that part up like super loud because I want to like recreate that theater experience of the.
I'm pretty sure he couldn't just burn exactly half of that money too, but that scene is awesome every time. It's like, this town needs better class criminals.
It's funny that you bring that up, but everyone forgets who's on top of the money.
It's his henchmen guys.
Yeah, the Chinese
guy.
Yeah,
Wong or whatever his name is.
They put him on top of the money and then burn him alive, and nobody ever thinks about that. The Joker burned a man alive.
He had no he had no remorse. He had no remorse. And as I was saying, it's like, so the first time I see it, you don't really get it. Second time, it's like, this is awesome. And then it's just like, it's one of those movies. It's years and years of watching it again and seeing different bits and pieces and then talking about it with people. And it's like, you really get an appreciation
and you notice
of like
the mirroring of like the front end to the back end of the movie and how like they just mimic each other. And there's so many callbacks and things that you don't notice on a first viewing.
Yeah, it's really, it's honestly one of the most perfect films made in my lifetime. So that's personal favorite. Here we're going to go into your favorite comedy movie of the year. And here I have a three-way tie. I couldn't just pick one. Pineapple Express, Step Brothers, and Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
This year in particular, and I didn't see all of these in theaters, so I saw these spread out over, years past. But it had so many great comedies that I still watch over and over today. But Forgetting Sarah Marshall by far is just, there's something about the characters, I think the stars at the time, like where they were in their careers, I don't know, it just works perfectly, and it's a hilarious scenario. And then bringing on, God, what's his name?
Russell Brand.
Yes, Russell Brand.
Knew exactly where you were going.
Yeah, having not known who he was prior to that, and then being introduced this eccentric dude that is like, I thought he was actually like maybe a British singer or something like that I didn't know about.
It's why I starred that. I love Pineapple Express. I love Step Brothers. I saw both those movies in the theater at the same day. I love those movies. I have Forgetting Sarah Marshall starred, though, because that movie, it's just different. There's nothing else that I can think of that is like that movie. The eccentric characters, the different... I mean, Paul Rudd's guy, he's really a throwaway character in the movie, and he's probably my favorite character in the whole movie.
I know.
I mean, he's just there.
It's just so great that he's like this throwaway character of somebody that obviously has gone on to do some really great things.
He's Ant-Man.
Like, yeah, but like...
He saved the world.
And there were two pivotal moments within that film that he was a part of, but it was just like... Who is this guy?
Jonah Hill, too. I just forgot about him and his character. He really does nothing for the story. He's just super funny. Yeah, it's so much different.
Everyone has a one-liner. It's just everyone's got something.
And I mean that no disrespect towards Pineapple Express and Step Brothers. It's just, you've seen Will Ferrell be silly. You've seen stoner comedies. There's nothing else like Forgetting Sarah Marshall. I challenge anyone to tell me what's similar to that.
It's a thing all its own. I don't really know what I would say. If you've seen this, you would like Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
It's different.
Tropic Thunder, too.
I have that in my honorable mentions.
Tropic Thunder was what I went into that somewhat blind, and what was so great about that was the trailers
Hilarious.
that they did, which we totally got.
Yeah.
Like in the movie theater, we were like,
this is ridiculous.
Is this a real thing? Like, we thought these were real trailers for stuff because it goes right into it.
Yep.
And then the Tom Cruise
I was just
reveal.
about to say the greatest cameo of all time.
Amazing. And the fact that he like fought for that role and then like fought for the fat hands and like all the stuff that came out later about that character.
Can you imagine how nervous Bill Hader was to be like sitting next to Tom Cruise on this?
Tom Cruise.
Yeah. I couldn't have done this without you. Really? No, a fucking monkey could have done your job. So funny. It's the best. It's really one of the more underrated movies, and
And it was pushing the limits for its day, and now it definitely couldn't be a thing that would be made.
I was just about to say, the only reason it's not looked at as one of the best is because Robert Downey Jr. in blackface doesn't age well, even though it's hilarious. Other honorable mentions for comedies, I think these are more guilty pleasures for me. Role Models and Semi-Pro.
I love Role Models.
Super funny. Why do kids do drugs? Because they're awesome. That's one of the best lines ever.
Semi-Pro was all right. You Don't Mess with the Zohan. I actually like that a lot.
I have that in my guilty pleasures. I didn't want to spoil it. I love that movie.
Yes Man is another one that I like a lot.
Red Bull.
Have you seen In Bruges?
I have,
it's a
but
dark
only
comedy.
Bits and pieces.
It's a little hard to get into, but like if you like, just really super dark comedy.
I know Colin Farrell's in it, so I'll like it.
Yeah,
he's one of my guilty pleasures.
Sex Drive is another one that we saw in theaters, not really knowing too much of what it was going to be. Didn't really have a lot of big name people in it. It's got a like cameo bit piece with Seth Green in it, and that character is he's Amish.
Yep.
That character is friggin' hilarious.
That was one of those ones that somebody that I was friends with in middle school and high school had that movie on DVD, and we watched that like every time I was at his house. It's a funny movie.
I downloaded a extended version of that.
Really?
And it's meant to be stupid. They're like, do not watch this unless you've seen the original.
Oh, okay.
And all they do is add random naked girls running across the screen, like not even done well. It's just like they'll put boobs and penises random places.
What a job.
Yeah, it'll just be like...
What a job. Mom, I want to work in Hollywood. Action and thriller of the year. Dark Knight, we already had that for movie of the year, so that was pretty obvious for action thriller. Honorable mention: Iron Man, Taken, Wanted. Those are all movies we already talked about. Here's 3 movies we haven't talked about. Defiance, which is a Daniel Craig movie set in World War II, where him and his brothers, they save a bunch of Jews. Awesome movie. I remember seeing that at the Senator with my dad. Super intense. Bronson is a Tom Hardy movie where he plays Bronson. That is an awesome movie.
That is a very intense movie.
Yeah, and I mean
if you know the story of like the guy that's actually based on, it's not too far of a stretch of what the guy actually is, which makes it even that much more
the movie.
Insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and I think that is really kind of the movie that put Tom Hardy on the map. He had been acting for a while in that movie. He was actually in a Star Trek movie before then, but like Bronson, I think, was the movie where people was like, wow, this guy Tom Hardy is legit. Here's a movie that I'm really interested to talk about with you. One of my favorite movies from this year, and one of my favorite movies overall, Cloverfield.
Ooh. So this is interesting for a couple of reasons. I don't know if you know much about the marketing campaign that came along with Cloverfield.
I don't remember it. I saw Cloverfield late.
It was one of the first movies that utilized social media to advertise its film.
Really?
So what it did is, the whole story arc of like he's moving to Japan because he's working for this company. So they created websites, social media pages, and like all these accounts and stuff all over the internet to make this fake soda company, talking about they're doing offshore drilling and all of this stuff to kind of set up the premise of they're going to be drilling and this thing's going to come up.
So this kind of all blends into the universe because like people are always clamoring about the Cloverfield universe that Abrams is. So
and then
cool.
They created social media pages for like a lot of the main characters to where it was like leading up to the film. He's like, doing this, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to the Carney Fair, whatever, with my girlfriend. And that ends up as like part of the tape that like gets overwritten where he's like on the Ferris wheel with her and stuff like that. So like leading up to the movie, like those posts were getting put on like his Facebook page and stuff. I don't know if it's still up, but you could probably look up the information on it.
It's probably on YouTube.
And then like leading up to it was like, oh, I'm going to be bon voyage. I'm going to Japan in 2 days. And then it was like the release was 2 days later of the film. And then you kind of got like, you're wrapped up in the world because like they created all of this fake soda company and this like all this stuff. So they created it was almost like the modern version of what the Blair Witch Project did, where it's like you couldn't really fact check the Blair Witch Project because the internet wasn't like a really huge thing. And so you kind of had to do your own research and like who's going to really do that at that time.
Yeah.
But then like since people were using the internet to fact check things, they kind of used it against people to advertise the film, which
That's
was
so
a genius
cool.
marketing campaign, but it doesn't get done anymore.
I think that's probably a big reason why that movie has lived on in such infamy and is strong a universe. You know, you got it wasn't
10
really,
Cloverfield
yeah,
Lane.
10 Cloverfield Lane, and then the Cloverfield Paradox, which is actually my favorite movie out of all three.
I liked 10 Cloverfield Lane. I just loved
John Goodman
Goodman
is incredible in that movie. I just liked I don't like anything time travel that is like, here's a mind fuck. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, sweet. You came up with something interesting. Drama movie of the year. I have Doubt here. Like I said earlier, this is one of my favorite movies of the year.
I had a tie with The Wrestler and Milk, but go ahead with. I haven't actually seen Doubt, so
Really?
I don't know anything about
I
it.
would suggest seeing it. I remember watching it with my dad a couple years after it came out, and I remember being really into it. And my dad at the end of the movie goes, "You like that? That was fucking weird." And it's like, you know, people just look at movies differently because it is a movie about this person who thinks that a priest molested a child, and it is all about the seeds of doubt, and you can have an idea of what happened, but until you know for sure or you were there, you just don't know.
Right.
And it's a really, really awesome movie. Meryl Streep, Amy Adams, Viola Davis, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Go fucking see that shit.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like-
I was gonna say you just you sold me on it just by naming people.
yeah, everyone at home, go see that. So you had Milk and The Wrestler.
Yeah, The Wrestler I would pick as my best drama just because it turned an actor that I wasn't particularly keen on into somebody that I like immensely respected, and it just the accurate portrayal of what that life is like, and just the struggle that he went through throughout the film of like picking up the pieces and then just dropping everything and just.
I'm pretty sure Sean Penn won the Academy Award for Milk, too,
I think he did,
when
too.
he played
Yeah.
Harvey Milk.
Yep.
Josh Brolin in that movie as well. Awesome
Yeah.
performance by him, and James Franco is awesome in that
My buddy
movie
Dave
as well.
always gives me shit, and he says, "You've never seen Milk," and I'm like, "I've seen Milk." He's like, he just for whatever reason thinks I've never seen it.
Yeah, it's a really good movie. Honorable mentions I have here for drama: Revolutionary Road. Tough watch, but if you can get through it once, it's a one and done. You don't need to watch it twice. But Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet are both fantastic in this movie. Benjamin Button, we already talked about that one. Hurt Locker, another one we talked about. Gran Torino. Here's one we haven't talked about. 7 Pounds. I don't know if you ever saw that. It's a
haven't
Will
seen it.
Smith movie. Kind of a weird movie. I needed a second watch on it the first time I saw it, but I was young. Be interested to watch it now and see what I thought about it. It's a weird
There's
movie, but
these-
it's good.
So these weird commercials keep coming on. I can't remember where. It might be on YouTube that I've been seeing them, where they're clips from movies that, like one of the movie channels, like HBO or something, is just they're putting it on their channel now, and saying it's part of their rotation. So they'll play a clip from the movie. Recently, they played a clip from 7 Pounds, and it was like a really intense scene, and I was like, might want to go watch that.
Is it any of the stuff with Will Smith and Woody Harrelson?
No, it's him alone. He's making a phone call. He's saying, "I want to report a suicide."
Okay, yeah, no,
And
about, yeah.
they're like, "Okay, who committed suicide?" And he said, "Me."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, all right."
Yeah, there's a scene in there with him and Woody Harrelson that is it's incredible. It's I think it's actually next to Ali. I think it's Will Smith's best performance in this movie.
And I like Pursuit of Happiness a lot. So that's a.
Yeah, shit, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, I take that back. I'll put 7 Pounds at number 3. Pursuit of Happiness 1. Ali 2. Animated movie of the year. We kind of already talked about that. Wall-E.
Yeah.
It honestly wasn't even close. The only honorable mention I have here was Kung Fu Panda, and I wrote that just to be nice because I know people like that movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there was anything else that particularly stood out for me.
Here's one of my favorite categories, or a category that I think we're going to have a lot of fun with, and that is Guilty Pleasure. A movie that, maybe is not very popular, or, you're not very excited about telling people that it's your favorite movie. Number 1 I have here, a Guilty Pleasure, is The House Bunny.
I've never seen it, but I love her. What's her name? Anna,
Anna Faris.
Yeah. She's hilarious in everything that she's in, but that was one of those ones I'm like, nah, it's not going to be. That's a watch at home, and then it just never happened.
Yeah, it's silly. You watch it one time, it's funny. Yes Man. It was a movie you brought up earlier. I really like this movie. I remember seeing it in the theaters. I was obsessed with Jim Carrey as a kid, so I would watch him in anything.
That's a rewatch movie for me. I've rewatched that a lot. I don't think it falls under the category of guilty pleasure. I think it's a funny movie.
You Don't Mess with the Zohan. We talked about that one. That's a guilty pleasure for me. We already talked about it. We both like that movie a lot. It's one of the more maligned Adam Sandler movies, but
just like
smell the food.
Him and John Turturro, right?
Mm-hmm.
The back and forth in the very beginning where they're like he puts a piranha down his shorts, and it's like you see it horribly CGI'd running around in his shorts. I'm like, come on, that's funny. It's super stupid.
The scene alone where he's like, "I'm sorry, you're going out of business." Oh, I'm not going out of business. That just helps my customers come in. That's hilarious.
Yes,
That is one of the funniest
Hello,
lines.
going out of business. No, the phone call. Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Oh, my, so funny.
Seven Humpsy. Seven Source Space Schools. And it goes on for like 20 minutes.
I got 3 more guilty pleasures here. Zach and Miri Make a Porno is
I think that's just a hilarious movie.
Kevin Smith directed that. He has a great story about that where he said that was the first Seth Rogen movie not to make like X amount of money in the box office, and he's like, I was depressed for 2 months thinking I had broken Seth Rogen.
Oh, what's his face that's in that?
Yeah, because Jay is in the movie.
Yeah, Jason Mewes is in it, but also
Dante, the blonde, the angry one. You're talking? Talking about the guys from Clerks?
The guy that plays the gay porn star. God, I can't think of his name.
Justin Long.
Justin Long.
Yeah,
hilarious.
So funny.
That is easily the best character in that whole movie.
Shut your mouth before I fuck you. That's hilarious.
I am sorry if I'm out of line here, but are you in gay porn? Guilty as charged.
So funny. 2 more guilty pleasures, and these are like real deep dives here. Guilty pleasures. W, which was the George W. Bush movie they did that year with Josh Brolin. It's kind of been dragged through the mud for some historical inaccuracies, but I don't care. Josh Brolin's widely entertaining.
I was going to say it's probably just entertaining. It doesn't really matter that.
And he does a great impression too. And my last guilty pleasure, I would be surprised if you saw this. I'd be surprised if anyone who listened to this saw this. The Speed Racer movie. I
did
love
not
that
see
movie.
it, but I wasn't a fan of Speed Racer as a kid, and it just didn't seem like something I would be.
It is just visually cool. The story is terrible.
I would assume that it would be.
Yeah. And it's from the Wachowski. Cool. It's from the Wachowski sisters. Like they know about visuals and they know about making shit look cool. My God, they did The Matrix. Yeah, Speed Racer. I really enjoy that movie. Movies that you haven't seen that.
No. I got guilty pleasures.
Oh, you do? Okay, okay.
I've got ones that you probably I don't know on your list. I had Step Up to the Streets.
No, I've never seen that.
So the Step Up series, terrible movies.
Channing Tatum in that one?
Yes, I think for a brief, he makes a cameo in it. But the Step Up movies aren't movies in the traditional sense. They're dance sequences masquerading as a movie. And if you look at them as just cool dance sequences, they're great.
Yeah.
They're super entertaining. I'm like, I wish I could dance like that, but I can't.
Yeah.
and like all of the Step Up movies, I've probably seen all of them, and they're all terrible as far as the storyline's concerned. The acting's terrible, but the dancing, it's dancing.
It's cool. It's cool. Oh man, that is truly a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Never Back Down.
Is that the cage fighting movie?
That is the MMA fighting movie.
Yeah,
with the guy that looks like he could be Tom Cruise like 30 years ago.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw it. Is Digimon in that movie?
Huh?
Digimon, the guy, it's the black actor he's in the early part of Guardians of the Galaxy. He's the first one who sees Star-Lord.
He's the
guy who trains him, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that. My Uncle
Master
Barry.
Roca.
Yeah, my Uncle Barry in Massachusetts obsessed with this movie. He always has it on. It's a super cool movie. Awesome fight scenes.
Yes. Kind of terrible acting, and it's kind of, poorly written dialogue, but it's just entertaining.
It fits into my theory of any good action movie can be described in 3 sentences or less. This guy wants to beat somebody up who has wronged him. It's just as simple. And there's a chick involved.
He has anger issues, storied past. There's a girl.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
That's the movie.
Yeah.
And then the last one is Jumper.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah. And that's one of those ones that has such a great, phenomenal concept. And then you've got, what's his name with the silver hair in it?
Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson's in it. And Samuel L. Jackson was kind of like the name to pull it, pretty much. I think that his star power was enough to pull people in.
And like, hey, look, Anakin and something else.
Yeah, Anakin doing some other thing. And they realistically set it up to have a sequel, but I feel like the execution was poor enough on the film itself that will never happen.
I also think that they grossly underestimated how much the internet hated Hayden Christensen.
Yes.
I mean, and I really like that movie. I think it's
The
super
concept
cool.
for it is great. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a kid being able to like transport yourself anywhere in the world at any given time?
Right? Best idea ever.
It's super cool.
Super cool. And the visual when he jumps I mean, spoiler alert, but when he jumps the house, that's awesome. That was so cool.
Yeah.
Lots of awesome visuals in that movie. Movies you haven't seen that you want to see from that year. Quantum Solace is one that I have here. And The Boy in the Striped PJs, which I think, just writing it down as PJs seems a little disrespectful since I know it's about...
Pajamas.
Yeah, I know it's about a little boy in a Nazi prison. IP Man and the Changeling. I know I said that wrong, but it's an Angelina Jolie movie where her kid is missing and the FBI tries to pass this imposter kid off as her kid. Angelina Jolie was nominated for the movie.
I want to say I saw this in theaters because this sounds really familiar.
I remembered it.
Yeah, no, I did see this in theaters.
I remembered it when I read the bio line. I was like, yeah, I remember hearing about that. But it wasn't something that would spark my interest at the time. But now I was like, I want to see that shit.
It was super freaky.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. No, yeah, that movie was definitely super freaky. That one and a movie that is actually pretty similar to that was, and I can't remember the name of it or what year it came in, but it was around the same, maybe within a 5-year span of that. There was a movie where all these kids are just like getting disappearing and everyone like doesn't remember their kids, but one of the main character remembers her kid and then like starts going to people and telling them and all that, and then like they start chasing them down and it's like people get sucked up like in the trailer somebody gets sucked up into the sky like randomly. Like that movie was very similar to how that other movie is. Yeah, freaky.
Yeah. You get take somebody's kids away from them. That's a setup for a pretty solid movie.
I mean, how many people can relate to that and feel a certain way about that?
I know it's a movie that you and I have talked about before, the Hugh Jackman movie where he's going out and looking for his kid. We remember that one, Prisoners. Yeah.
Yes.
Woo,
yeah.
that one's nuts.
That was one of those ones that went under the radar for me, and I hadn't seen it. And then I was on Reddit one day, and people were asking about like, what's the best movies you've seen or blah blah blah. And Prisoners kept coming up, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And I downloaded it and watched it, not even seeing a single trailer for it, and it just blew my mind. And Paul Dano in it is just insane. Like
so good. He's the best. He really is one of the best. Did you have any movies from this year that you haven't seen that you wanted to?
Gran Torino, definitely.
Oh yeah, I have to talk about it.
That's been on my list for quite some time. It's just not one of those ones that I've watched.
Yeah, you definitely have to check that out. It's an awesome movie. So we'll move on to trends from the year. We're getting on towards the end of the episode here. Trends from the year. I think the trend is pretty obvious, and I think we talked about it a couple times here. The beginning of not just the MCU, but the whole start of the superhero explosion.
So you had talked about that, but another thing that I noticed about 2008 that I didn't notice at the time, like the trends that were happening. It often happens with movies. You don't notice it because the studios kind of time these things to come out around each other. And you notice that like there'll be a movie that's like, oh, this is exactly like so-and-so. Like, so they did this thing where a lot of comedies came out that are like irreverent comedies. And they're like these like taboo subjects, or they'll talk like Forgetting Sarah Marshall is just like they were kind of raunchy and like you know, it was full frontal male nudity, and like there were certain things in there that was like
the whole sex scene where it's like a performance thing, you know, that was out there.
And then stuff with Tropic Thunder and In Bruges, I was telling you about, it's very dark comedy, and it was just like tons of movies that had come out that I didn't realize all came out this year that I still watched until today. Zack and Miri Make a Porno, Pineapple Express. I mean, a movie about making a porn to settle your debts, and a movie about, you know, a special strain of drugs that's going to get you killed by a drug dealer. Like,
yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, it was definitely out there. You don't see as many movies like that. Usually, you get one Sausage Party, or you get one, like, what was the movie they made this past year with the little kids, the Seth Rogen movie?
Oh, yeah.
You usually get one of those.
Good Boys.
Yeah, Good Boys.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I noticed that was a trend for this year was terrible parody movies.
Yeah, I think superhero movie was in this year or something like
Meet
that.
the Browns. I can't remember the entire list of them, but there were about disaster movie. I think was Date Movie this year.
Yeah, Date Movie. That was the one that I saw. Date Movie. Date Movie was in the list.
There was a ton of like these crap parody movies.
God, you remember when that was a thing?
And I think that they were trying to get bite off of the fame and success of Scary Movie.
Yeah, totally.
Scary Movie did it right, and then continuing on with the series, they kind of knew what they had, so they kind of played hard into the ridiculousness of that this is even successful, and then they come out with these movies that are like, oh, we can make fun of the whole date movie genre.
You also, like, just think about the time period that Scary Movie came out. You just going to the movies was different. We went to the movies more often then. Like, you're not going to spend $10 or more than $10 to go see Date Movie.
Yeah,
you know, like,
yeah.
I'm going to spend $10 to go see people make fun of shit that I don't even really like. You know, like
to make jokes about movies that I haven't even seen.
Yeah, exactly. It's strange. I remember thinking the same thing. Remember when they were making all those movies where it's like Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day, MLK Day. Like, it's like every holiday.
Arbor Day.
And it was like Bradley Cooper and Matthew McConaughey were in all of them. Like, it was,
This spring, Arbor Day.
you can't wear white after whatever day. Yeah, that's funny. That whole trend just died, like the parody movie. I remember going to the theaters, probably was around this time, and seeing a parody. It was like a sports movie parody, and thinking it was actually pretty funny when I was just a kid. So, yeah, final thoughts on the year since
it was
I've been talking for a long time.
A better year. When you mentioned 2008, I was like, I don't really remember a whole lot of stuff coming out that year. But for comedy, like for me, all the comedies that came out were just absolutely awesome. And then just entertaining movies. Like there were some really great movies that came out, but it wasn't like a banger year for me. But like movies that I rewatch, movies that I have put on as background noise and like kind of like, oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah, no, I think you make a great point there. There's not a lot of movies here where you're gonna like lock that away in the Smithsonian right now.
Yeah.
Like, I think Dark Knight, I'll put Iron Man in there just because what it means to, but there's not a lot of movies that you're, lock that away right now. There's some other years we're going to talk about on this show where, like, I know there's one year where There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men came out in the same year.
Yeah, and how do you split that up?
Yeah. So it's not one of those years, but you look at it, IMDb had a great thing, and it helped with my research a lot, where it said most popular movies from that year. And it was just going through it, and it's like, that's a good movie. That was an entertaining movie. So you're right. It's a lot of entertaining movies. And I think that's probably going to be a theme moving forward with the show, where it's like you pick a year and it's like, oh, I forgot that movie came out that year. Because you don't think about movies.
Because you're comparing it to the other movies that came out that year, and you're like, I remember that year for this.
And exactly. And how often do you really associate a year with a movie?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I think that was more of a thing that happened when you went to the movies, and that's the only time you saw movies.
Yes.
Like, how often did you have a movie collection back in the 80s?
Of home video and then like streaming services, like completely killed the idea of like, oh, I've seen that came out in this year.
Yeah, and I saw that at that theater or whatever. So yeah, but I think the real final thought for me on this year is this is where it all started for me. Like, we are here doing this right now in large part because of this year and my obsession with The Dark Knight. You know, I spent years after that movie came out watching that movie and pausing it and then running over to the mirror in my room and trying to like recreate the Joker's face or his like tone and scenes. Like that character and his portrayal of that character just grabbed me so much. It really, I still wanted to be a professional athlete at this point, but that planted the seed of, hey, maybe one day you could be an actor. And later on, it blossomed into, yeah, that's what I want to do. So, you know, The Dark Knight and really the Iron Man movie, too, because I remember seeing that movie in the theaters with my dad, and just, like, it was so cool. And, you know, just this year is where it all started. I don't think we'd be doing this here if it wasn't for 2008.
I don't think that was the year that completely got me going, like, as far as the filmmaking is concerned. But looking back on the year that was, there's definitely some movies that have influenced my way of thinking about movies and my way of writing and just filmmaking in general. So yeah, fantastic year for movies.
And I think that's the best way to end it. I want to thank you guys for sticking around. Debut episode of Collab Digital's brand new podcast. The year was 2008, and it was a damn good one. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.